I always like to point out that if you're listening to the radio, that means you likely have good hearing health. But if you're struggling with your hearing and you'd like to find a solution so that you can tune in on a daily basis to News Radio 1310 and that's News Radio 1310 KLIX, as well as online at newsradio1310.com, and perhaps you listen there. I would recommend that you check in with Dr. Christine Pickup at Mount Harrison Audiology in Rupert. Why would you choose Mount Harrison Audiology? Commitment. Dr. Pickup and her family are honored to be part of the Mini-Cassia community. They're proud to support local sports, schools, and the Rupert 4th of July celebration. As a locally owned independent business, your support allows her in turn to help the community. Mount Harrison Audiology is committed to serving each patient and the communities that they live in. Trust your hearing health to the only locally owned hearing healthcare practice in the Magic Valley. Call for your appointment today. The number 208-312-0957. Joining us in the studio this morning is Steve Millington. He's the chairman of the Twin Falls County Republican Party, and I've got to make sure his microphone is on.
Okay, am I real?
Yeah.
I'm here.
I wanted to share something with you right off the bat when you got here. This is from, there was apparently a program done yesterday online where Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren answered questions that people sent in about politics. Now, Democrats last Wednesday, Sanders said he was horrified by what had taken place that day and when one of his volunteers went on a shooting spree. And they said that they were going to dial back the rhetoric and that everyone else should do it. But take a listen to what this man has to say as he's answering a question from a woman named Mary.
Our job from coast to coast is to bring millions of people together. When I talk about a political revolution, this is what I'm talking about. Is for people all over this country to put pressure on every level of government to say that in America, we are the wealthiest country in the history of the world. We are not going to do horrendous things to millions and millions of working people. We got to stand up and fight back. We have got to be involved in the political process in a way that we have never been before, because what is happening now in Washington is unprecedented. This is the worst piece of legislation, the House bill, that I can recall in 25, 26 years in the United States Congress. So you have got to, Mary, act in an unprecedented way. Think big. Get involved in every way that you can. Rally the American people. This is an extraordinarily unpopular bill. It's not like the majority of Americans have said to Mitch McConnell or Paul Ryan, you got to do this. Nobody likes this. This is a terrible bill. They do it because they think they can do it. They're doing it because they're going to have huge amounts of campaign contributions behind them. So, Mary, stand up and fight back in every way that you can.
Fight back in every way that you can.
That, the idea that we want to bring, the first sentence prefaced the whole comment by saying we have to bring people together. And that always seems to be their rally cry. We have to bring people together. And then we want to fight back in every way we can.
By any means necessary might be the other phrase.
That's right. I was going to say, or any way we can. So, the whole concept is contradictory. If you're going to bring people together, then fine. I don't agree with some portions of this bill, but I think through the deliberative process in the Senate, we can come up with a bill that is meaningful and useful to all Americans, blah, 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 blah. No. The first thing we're going to do is fight back. And the reason we're going to fight back is we have no hope of any kind in the Republican leadership to give us something that is going to be socialistic. I'm sorry, I couldn't think of a better word there. But that's exactly what he's looking for.
We have a caller looking to join us. Telephone number 736-0300. We're at 827 on KLIX. Steve Millington is our studio guest. Caller, you're up next. You're on the air.
Good morning, gentlemen. Am I the only one that finds it how convenient it is that the Democrats seem to have forgotten about how they wanted us just to pass their Obamacare bill without even looking at it or reading a single page of it? Yet they're screaming and crying about the Republicans' bill. Too much secrecy. We can't see it. We're going to slow down the government and do everything we can to obstruct. I just love how it's always good for them, but whenever we try to do something ourselves, the world's come to an end.
And, of course, they'll use even rifles to slow it down if they can.
Yeah. And it's interesting the absolute hypocrisy that we have to pass this bill to see what's in it, and then, oh no, we can't even consider this bill because I haven't read it yet. This morning on one of the news shows, Paul Ryan was talking about getting a tax bill passed, and the news commentator said, "Well, yeah, but there's so much work to be done, and nobody's looked at it." Chuck Schumer from New York hollering that the Republicans are trying to do this in the dark, in the dark of night. I think is what the word he used. Nobody has seen the bill yet, and Paul Ryan says it's been in the House Ways and Means. I think that's the tax writing bill in the House of Representatives. They have had one there now for 90 days.
Yes.
If you haven't read it, it's because you don't know how to read. And I
There's
thought
a
to myself,
possibility with Democrats. That's why they think we should give all the dumb animals everything for free.
And so you look at the absolute hypocrisy between where they are and the realities of the world, and it's just mind-boggling. Yeah, how can they continue to do this?
We've got more on the way with Steve Millington. He's the chairman of the Twin Falls County Republican Party. That's on the way in a few minutes. Bill Colley with you as well on Top Story on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. Our studio guest is Steve Millington. Bill Colley with you as well this morning on Top Story on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. I want to thank everyone for joining us. Steve's here until 9 o'clock this morning. Quick note, it's going to be in some parts of the valley today close to 100. I turned on the AC last night before I went to bed and left it on. It was very nice. If you're doing that, though, and you're having some trouble, you need to call the folks at Ramsey Heating and Electric because they'll come out and they'll get the job done right. They'll get it done right the first time. Problem-free, cozy summers I found at Ramsey Heating and Electric, located at 2600 Overland Avenue in Burley. You can give a telephone call, too, to Ramsey Heating and Electric. The telephone number is 678-0459. Ramsey Heating and Electric, where they sell warm winters and cool summers. 8:34 now, and we're at 73. Steve Millington, there was a very funny tongue-in-cheek story from Betsy Russell in the Spokesman Review yesterday. Apparently, Governor Otter is on a trade mission in Paris. Lieutenant Governor Brad Little is on a trade mission in Washington. There was a picture of both Little and Mike, or not Mike Crapo, but Jim Risch. Standing talking to people, trying to get them interested in coming to Idaho to do business. So there was some discussion. Was Brett Hill going to be acting governor? Well, apparently the thought was he was leaving, going out of town for Father's Day weekend, a long weekend. So it turned out the governor's office said, well, we believe the acting governor is Scott Bedke. So Betsy called Scott Bedke yesterday. He was buying farm supplies and said, I didn't know.
Yeah, thanks for cluing me in. I'm just trying to get my work done here.
So they called the governor's office and said, well, wait a minute. Nobody's told Scott Bedke. And the spokesman at the governor's office said, well, I don't know who's been told or hasn't been told. But then Brett Hill came forward and said, well, I didn't leave town as I planned. I postponed my trip to Utah. So he indeed was the acting governor. But
it's comical that they wouldn't have a little bit more clearly defined process. Obviously, when the governor leaves, he has to notify the lieutenant governor. So if the lieutenant governor is going to leave, then he notifies the number 3 in the line of succession, and that's the president pro tem of the Senate. That's Brent Hill from over in Idaho Falls.
Brad Little did that, but nobody told the governor's office who was designated.
This is kind of a gist of a miscue. When you are the, quote, acting governor, you have to notify the governor's office of the things that you're doing. So Brad Little had a little bit of a miscue there, but he did send a letter to Brent Hill, and Brent Hill said, okay, fine, I've got you covered. I'll be in the state of Idaho through that entire period of time.
I put a post up on our website about her story, though, because it's not like the governor is going to come back from Paris on an old tramp steamer. He's going to fly, and number 2, he's constantly in electronic communication. In this day and age, there's no way that even if he's in Paris or Brad Little's in Washington, they're seconds away from, contact.
Anybody can contact if they've got their cell phone with them, and I'm sure that they do have. And staff members, for example, from the governor's office, would surely know exactly how to get a hold of not only Butch Otter and Brad Little, but if need be, Brent Hill or Um, Bedkey. I mean, it's not a big deal.
Other big story on
The issue, if I could just interrupt you, the issue that they have there is that constitutionally you have to be in the state in order to function as the governor.
right.
And so when you leave the state for any reason, you have to designate a number two in command.
We want to point out other big story in state politics. This had been rumored that there would be another name getting involved in the race for the first district congressional seat being vacated by Raul Labrador. Of course, last week we had Russ Fulcher say he was going to do it. We all saw that coming. Lane Bangurter, who is Donald Trump's guy here in Idaho, now says he may be considering it as well.
I think that that's not surprising. Bangurter has built a tremendous political base. He was President Trump's Idaho chairman, and so he has been up and down and around. He's talked to many, many people. His name is not unknown. It is. They may have to think for just a moment about the connection, but they do know that there's a definite connection between Bangurter and President Trump.
We should note that if he were to run for Congress and win that seat in that three-way primary, and there won't be really there'll be token opposition from the other party, but Lane would have to take a pay cut, a big pay cut, to serve in Congress.
That's interesting. However, I'm not sure. I have no proof on this, but I have heard stories that the residual benefits from serving in Congress just go on forever.
He has a long history. He's the agricultural advisor for U.S. Senator Mike Crapo and has been a longtime assistant in that office. But he may also have an opportunity in the Department of Agriculture in Washington, which will impact any decision about Congress.
They're looking at him. I think they may hold off on an appointment as an assistant secretary of agriculture, pending his decision on a run for Congress in the first congressional district. Bangurter is a lot more. He's probably going to relate better with the mainstream Republican. Fulcher, is kind of over on the far right hand side, almost libertarian element, and so Bangurter is going to draw very quickly to the more moderate mainstream Republican voter.
David Leroy should be considering retirement. We've got more with Steve Millington on the way in just a couple of minutes. Bill Colley with you, too, on Top Story. It's 8:40. We're at 73. Steve Millington joins us most Tuesday mornings, unless he's in Wyoming or Utah or traveling somewhere.
Today I'm here.
He's the chairman of the Twin Falls County Republican Party. We're at 74. It's 8:43. Bill Colley with you as well. We may have, coming up after news at 9 o'clock, Grant Loebs, Twin Falls County prosecuting attorney. He could address a lot of the big decisions that were made in the Supreme Court yesterday, some big time rulings, as well as he might be able to talk to us about with the role of a special counsel and exactly what Robert Mueller's supposed to be doing. But in the meantime, I wanted to ask Steve Millington his thoughts on what's going on in Georgia today, because you see, they've lost two of this is the third special election in the last 151 days since Donald Trump became president. And the Democrats thought for sure they'd pick up Kansas and maybe even Montana.
Right.
They lost both. Even after the Republicans smacked down a reporter, literally, they still won in Montana. So we keep hearing that if Ossoff wins today, this is sheer evidence that the Trumpism is done. The country's changed. We're going to have the Democrats swing around and grab control again, except that the money this guy has raised, he doesn't live in the district where he's campaigning.
He can't even vote for himself in that district.
And the money he's raised is mainly from San Francisco, not Georgia. So, and he's raised the most money ever raised for a race for the U.S. House of Representatives. And this is a special election. And if he wins, media will say, aha, we showed you America really wants to be a socialist country. I just don't see it that way. And if he loses, then I guess, as I said earlier, what do? Do they go back out and start shooting people again?
I don't know. I would hope not, for heaven's sakes. But they are looking at spending somewhere just north of $40 million on that particular House race.
Wow.
Wow. mildly, that is a huge amount of money.
I heard 140,000 votes were cast already by absentee or early
Early
voting.
voting, yeah.
So, but we don't know which way those are breaking, I would imagine.
I haven't heard anything yet that, they always do the exit polling. And of course, if we vote early or if we do mail in or so forth, it's a little tough to have an exit poll on that.
Remember the Senate campaign in Nevada back in 2010 when you had a Republican candidate and she lost, and everyone said, "Aha,
Yeah.
that shows you that the Tea Party's done." And then, yet the Republicans took the House that year. The Republicans strengthened their majority in 2014, and then we took the White House in 2016. So it seems that every time there's one of these that happens where a Democrat does prevail, media quickly rushes in and says, "Aha, it's the end of the Republican Party." But in the long run, it hasn't really worked out that way.
So far, it has not had that impact on anything. I think what we're seeing here is if you just casually look at the headlines, this Ossoff fellow has won, hands down. Big, huge upset win. But if you dig deeper into that thing and look beyond just the headline, not quite so much. And even some of the polling organizations are hey, it's a little bit too close to call, or we're not real sure, or whatever. And in all honesty, I failed this morning to you sent me the information, and but I failed to look at the Rasmussen report to see what their polling shows
Yeah, yeah.
for Georgia. It would be a moderate surprise if Karen Handel lost this election in Georgia. She's very popular. She was a former Secretary of State in Georgia, and so she's well known in the state total. But keep in mind, this is only in the 6th congressional district. I don't know how many Georgia has. I think they have like 10 or 12 congressional districts.
Right, most of them centered around Atlanta, which is where
Yes.
this one is located.
Yeah, this
in
is
the
just
suburbs.
just to the very north of Atlanta, if I read the articles correctly, and so you still have this, and I think the media and the elitists and the liberals are really putting a lot of emphasis and a lot of hope that Ossoff will win this election and stem the tide, turn over the so there, you Trumpians, we have defeated you, and we will destroy everything you want to do.
They don't have any money left for any of the races, but we have a caller with us, 736-0300, the number to reach us. News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. Our guest, Steve Millington. He's the chairman of the Twin Falls County Republican Party, joining us on Top Story at 8:47. Caller, you're on the air.
Yeah, good morning, gentlemen. Bill and Steve, I good to talk to you. You know, I have zero doubt in my mind that she's going to win this election, and here's why. The Democrats can raise all this money and brag about how they're going to waste money, millions and millions of dollars on a campaign that they think they can win no matter what. I have zero doubt she will win, and here's why. There's too many people back there that were just like during the when Trump won against Hillary. Hillary will win. Hillary's going to win. I mean, I was kind of depressed myself, but everybody's giving it to him. It ain't going to go that way. She will win this election because people are sick and tired of this crap. They can see what's going on. You can sit there and push it in their face. They're spending hundreds of millions of dollars to try to get somebody elected into some little podunk office. But the Democrats have lived their day. The Republicans, and some of the good work you've done, Steve, the Republicans are back.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, it's just the fact that the Democrats are running scared tells me they have zero chance of him winning. I'll call you as soon as the election's over. I'll eat crow if I have to, but I don't think I will.
Boy, I sure hope you don't have to.
I want to thank him for the call. When he mentioned that, it just a thought struck me. During the elections here in Idaho last year, we kept hearing from, I think, some people in the newspaper business too as well, that in my home district, that we were going to see upsets, that these Democrats who were challenging Lance Clough and Stephen Hartkin, oh my goodness, this is going to be show and tell, and Twin Falls is now a bastion of the Democrat Party. And guess what happened? The Democrats got smoked.
And it's interesting that early on there was a lot of concern and a lot of question as to how tight those races will be. So the Republicans kind of saddled up their horse and got with the program, and when it was all said and done, all three of the Republicans, Hartgan and Clow and Hyder in
Mm-hmm.
District 24,
Mm-hmm.
all had margins in the high 60s and low 70s,
Glad I
winning
voted
votes.
several times.
Yeah. Actually, I drove in from an adjoining district and voted as often as they'd let me. But uh, you know, the media tries to paint the outcome the way they want it to be. I've got a statement at home on my desk. I want this to be the result. Therefore, my will is that should be the result. And sometimes in our minds, become delusional. We delude ourselves into thinking that if I say this often enough, that's the way it's going to be.
But I could see him winning just sheerly on because of the scope of the money they've spent. But that doesn't mean that that's going to be there in 2018.
And the other thing of it is in 2018, this is one right now in South Carolina. They're also having a special election today, and there's very little question as to who's going to win that particular race, and so there's not much effort put into that particular.
Funny, the media is not saying that that's indicative of anything. Then, right?
So we could lose one and win one on the same day, but the media and the liberal Democrats are going to scream, "We won, we won." No, 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 no. So did we. Now, and I hope our caller is exactly correct. I have great hopes for Karen Handel that she will, in fact, win this particular race. And I don't care if it's only by 1,000 votes. That would be wonderful. If, however, she could win this by a margin of, say, 54, 55% to 45%, that would be a huge event. And the Democrats, the big donors with the big checkbooks, are going to look around and say, "Hey, look, we gave you $40 million and you blew it. Don't come back and talk to me again. We gave you all kinds of money and you wasted it. You just blew it out. What's the matter with you people?" And so if the Democrats lose, they could have a tough time fundraising when 2018 shows up. And besides which, in 18, keep in mind, they got 435 House seats they've got to fund. Many of them will just be name-only people who are merely on the ballot, so that we have
such as first and second districts in Idaho.
In Idaho, right? They also have, I think, in 18 they have 34 U.S. senators on the ballot. It alternates between a 33, a 33, and a 34, but I think in 18 the number's 34, and the Democrats have got to defend, I want to say, 25 of those 34 seats.
We want to point out Steve Millington is our guest. He's the chairman of the Twin Falls County Republican Party. We're at 75. Hold on, it just jumped to 77.
Oh, boy, we're heat wave.
It's 53. Bill Colley with you as well on Top Story on News Radio 1310, KLIX, and NewsRadio1310.com. Steve giving us a Republican perspective on all of this today. Speaking of
wait a minute. Time out, Bill, time out. The Republicans' perspective is the only right perspective.
I agree with that. There's a handful of those folks listening today who may see it otherwise. Not that we're concerned, because the key there is the word handful. There's a story that didn't get a lot of attention, but one of our U.S. senators was behind a bill, and I want to talk about overwhelming support. There's 100 U.S. senators, 99 voted, 97 voted in favor of Mike Crapo's bill. This was related to sanctions on Russia.
That's correct. It's interesting that this particular bill, sponsored by Senator Crapo, was originated from the Senate Banking Committee. Now, Crapo happens to be the chairman of the Banking Committee, and so he was able to get this bill attached to another spending initiative. Oh, boy. Okay, never mind. It was an amendment to an already existing bill. But he got it put together through his chairmanship of the Senate Banking. And actually, there was a joint effort that included Senate Banking and Senate Foreign Relations. But Crapo, with his leadership in banking, carried the bill to the Senate. The vote was 97-2. The two people who voted against it were both Republicans, Rand Paul and Mike Lee. But what they basically said was, if you're going to if you're going to change sanctions against any foreign country, either you're going to impose additional sanctions or you are going to uh, uh, reduce sanctions against other countries. And the sanctions normally are a form of political uh, oversight, so to speak. Those things have to be approved by the Senate because that is a de facto treaty, and the Senate has the obligation to approve all treaties with foreign countries. Now, it's fascinating to me that the vote was so huge, lopsided, 97-2. Well, that basically sends a message to Trump that says, "We dare you to veto this thing." Because if you do, the vote could be 99-0.
We should point out that Mike Crapo and Jim Risch have safe seats. Uh, and Jim Risch will be running again. He's 75 years old, but he looks great. But I was told yesterday that Randy Staples said that Risch gave him a heads up that he plans to run for re-election, so he'll be serving in the Senate likely well into his 80s, if not beyond.
I heard that last week as well, that Risch has made it known to most of his staff members that his intention is to run again in 2018.
So he's going to pull a Strom Thurmond and just keep going and going and
Forever.
going.
Yeah, forever. But and I think that Risch is a member of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, as well as both Crapo and Risch are on the.
In the last 2 weeks, Jim Risch's profile, though nationally, has been raised quite high because of some of the hearings that he's participated in.
Exactly.
And his line of questioning and that old prosecutor coming out in him. And for that reason, he's going to have a bigger and bigger role in Washington if he stays.
I think he will. And Risch is one of those kind of guys who's very thoughtful and methodical in his approach to these kinds of things, especially when the TV cameras are running. He knows exactly how to play to that audience.
Next to Orrin Hatch and John McCain, he's a young pup.
That's yeah, exactly right. I visited with some people from Utah over the weekend too, and they all basically said, what in the world is with Orrin Hatch? Why doesn't he just hang it up?
He's 83, right? 83 or 84.
Call it a day,
But again, he looks fine.
And he still is very active, and he's on the ball every day. The thing that's fascinating to me is that Hatch is the president pro tem of the U.S. Senate. Mitch McConnell is the majority leader. We always hear about Mitch McConnell and what he's going to do. We never hear anything about Hatch being the president pro tem and how he could be directing the events of the U.S. Senate.
But if Hatch retires, then we're going to see Evan McMullin likely, I think.
Run again.
Yeah.
I think we'd see a couple of Utah people that would show up. McMullin might be one of them that for some reason they can't get past Mitt Romney.
Or John Huntsman.
Exactly.
We've got to take a break, and Steve Millington will join us again next week. He's the chairman of the Twin Falls County Republican Party. We're at 77, coming up on 9 o'clock news, and one more hour of the program, Top Story with Bill Colley on the way. And hope you can stick around.